Welcome back everyone to the weekly Mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about absolutely anything you like. As always, if you want to ask your questions for next week's episode, feel free to do so in the comment section down below. Twitter, Instagram, you know the drill by now. Shall we crack on with question 1, which comes from Glenn Robertson this week over on YouTube. What drivers do you think have the most pressure for them to perform this year? With 2021 contracts on the table, some drivers need to prove themselves more than others. Thank you for your question, Glenn. I chose this one to start with because, first of all, I'd quite like to do a separate video on this topic, going into a little bit more detail, but I kind of just wanted to gather your thoughts as well, because this is quite a subjective question, is how drivers need to perform and which drivers are under pressure, because you could certainly look at drivers like Lewis Hamilton being under pressure in the sense that he's going for that 7th world title to equal Michael Schumacher. But is he really under massive pressure? I think it's fair to say he's not going to be a driver under pressure from losing his seat in the world of Formula 1. So I'm going to focus this question on more that drivers, if they don't step up to the plate in 2020, if they don't perform, could potentially lose a seat. And as we have seen from last season, drivers like Hülkenberg, who didn't do awfully, still lost their seat. So you never quite know the internal politics of Formula 1. Anyway, to stop avoiding the question, drivers that spring to mind, I would say both Haas boys. Definitely Grosjean more in particular, but I've said a few times I think both of them could potentially be on the chopping block. K-Mag did very well in 2018, super well, but 2019 went under the radar a little bit, so maybe he could be, but Grosjean, bless him, 2018 wasn't great. 2019 wasn't awful, but I just think he needs to really pull a season out of the bag to prove himself again in Formula 1. He did it twice before in 2013, and then when he joined Haas at the beginning of 2016, really proved that he earned a seat. I'm just not too sure whether he quite warrants a seat in 2020, and especially on a 2021 grid. Other drivers I'm looking at, I think maybe either Gastly or Kvyat, whichever one performs worse out of those two, I think could be under a bit of pressure. So I think, well, that's just the nature of the Red Bull Junior system, I guess. Sebastian Vettel, maybe. He's off the back of 2 difficult seasons for Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc coming up through the team. I think that'll definitely add a notch of pressure. Antonio Giovinazzi as well, I think, had an average first year in Formula 1. His second half of the season in 2019 was much better than his first half. And of course, that P5 in Brazil at the end of the year really helped him out. I just get that feeling. I'm not too sure if Kimi Raikkonen's ready to leave just yet. I'm not too sure if Gio is ready to lead that team. And with 5 Ferrari young drivers in Formula 2 next year, I would say 3 or 4 of which I think will be fighting for the title next year in Formula 2. I think his seat is going to be under threat. So actually, although I don't think he was dreadful in 2019, I would probably say the most under pressure driver is Gio. But of course, I want to know your thoughts, because it's definitely a subjective one, this one. And what I think is quite interesting, especially from different points of view. And I'm also sure I've forgotten a driver or two, because that's usually the way. Thank you for your question, Glenn. Moving on to question 2 comes from Instagram. This one comes from Felix M. Hughes. Do you think that there could be any mid-season transfers this year in Formula 1? In all honesty, I didn't expect any transfers last season. Even though Gastly wasn't performing fantastically, I didn't think they would get rid of him that soon. But they did. They did it during the summer break. A lot of people felt last year, going into the season, that Bottas could potentially be in the firing line. I don't really see too many drivers that could be moving on. I chose to do this question after the first question because I think a lot of people straight away will probably point towards Grosjean. I think would be the most obvious, and maybe Alex Albon if he doesn't perform, and if Gastly continues to really continue his development that he's done at Toro Rosso. But even that I don't really see happening, which is quite strange, because before 2018, almost every year there was some kind of switch at some point in the season. 2018 was the first ever year where every driver on the grid not only remained on the grid, but remained in their same seats. That was the first season ever. And now that kind of seems just pretty straightforward. It doesn't seem too abstract a thought. So, Mercedes, I don't see any changes there. Ferrari, I don't see any changes there. Red Bull, I'm not seeing changes there. McLaren, Renault, I just don't realistically see it. I don't think a driver is really screaming at me in Formula 2 to be rushed up into Formula 1. I think the only realistic option of a driver who's ready to jump into Formula 1 on a short-term basis is Nico Hülkenberg. And again, the only team I see him going to is Haas. So why am I doing this video? This is a real Grosjean bashing video. I didn't expect to be sitting down to doing this one today. But yeah, probably Romain Grosjean, if anyone. And I kind of still see that as unlikely. But he's definitely on the most thin ice, I would say, out of all the drivers. I don't like today's video. What's going on? Moving on to question 3. Finally, a question not about Romain Grosjean, but I wanted to just... People have been asking me this question. I just want to kind of get my thoughts out there and move on from it. Because, this is not me bashing the question, because I understand why a lot of you want to know about this one. Do you think... I think that's my fault. It says 2. Apologies. Do you think that Mercedes will soon leave Formula 1 as a constructor? No, I don't. I really don't. I tell you what, Sean, the F1 Word, I think did a fantastic job of doing a video on this, so I would highly recommend after the video, please, going and checking out his video on it. I don't think I need to, because I think he summarised it so well. But I thought, including it in a mailbox kind of makes sense. Why would they leave now? I understand they have won everything that can be won in Formula 1. But why leave at the peak of your powers? The team are right on the cusp of just smashing, demolishing multiple Formula 1 records. Don't leave halfway through that. Surely it would make more sense to keep going, and then as soon as you have a couple of years of decline and it starts hurting brand's reputation, I guess, a little bit, I'm sorry, Williams fans, a little bit like Williams has turned into, maybe then you would consider it. But right now, I don't think that's the case, especially as well when they've kind of committed themselves long-term with young drivers. Okay, when we did our Young Drivers series a couple of months back in the summer, they didn't have the biggest young driver pool, which potentially suggests they could be looking elsewhere. And of course, this year they have made that jump into Formula E. And yeah, in the long term, it wouldn't massively surprise me if they did go to Formula E and left Formula 1. But not soon. I don't see that happening. I would even say I can see them being here at least till 2030. Maybe 25. I'll take it back to 25. But yeah, not in the next couple of seasons. I don't see that happening. Doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. But thank you for your question. A lot of you were asking about that. So I thought, you know what? I might as well get my thoughts out there. I'm not feeling it at the moment. Question number 4 comes from Sihari Desai, is how I will try and pronounce your name. I've probably butchered that. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to get better at pronunciations. Anyway, love this question. I was going to include it last week, and I feel it didn't quite fit in with the time limit I had for last week's episode, so I saved it for this week. So thank you for your question. What is the future for Pierre Gasly? A really straightforward question, I know, and it's not a lengthy, in-depth question. But when I actually read this question, I thought, I don't really know. Quite a few drivers in modern Formula 1, you can kind of at least have a guess at their career path. You can kind of say, well, Sergio Perez, is he really going to go to a top team? Maybe, not likely. Is he going to go to a team sidewards, like a McLaren or a Renault? Maybe, but he's kind of safe where he is, so I don't see him moving elsewhere. Most drivers, you can kind of do that kind of analysis. I just can't do that with Pierre Gasly. I really struggle, because I look at almost every team on the grid, including Williams, and think, after 2020, Pierre Gasly almost could end up anywhere. if he's beat comfortably by Danny Kvyat, that's going to hurt his reputation. But he's still a young driver, so maybe a team, if Red Bull let him go from the family, maybe a team like Williams take the gamble. Maybe a team like Haas take the gamble. He's a French driver, and for some reason, Renault really seem to want to get French drivers in that car. Maybe he'll go there. I look at other top teams. You know, if he beats Danny Kvyat, but there's no seat at Red Bull, maybe a Ferrari take a big gamble and try and entice him into their team. Maybe Mercedes do a thing like that as well. It seems unlikely, I know, but I just find it so interesting that he's just such an open book in Formula One. So here's my thoughts. Here's my more structured thoughts than just he could go anywhere. If he doesn't beat Kvyat, I think they will both stay at AlphaTauri again in 2021, because let's be real, that's a really good lineup at AlphaTauri. I think arguably their second best lineup of all time. I would say only Verstappen-Sainz was a better lineup, and close with Vern Ricciardo. They've had some good lineups at Toro Rosso and now AlphaTauri. Blimey, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a strong driver lineup. You're not really going to go wrong with those pair. If he beats Kvyat comfortably, I think he needs to think about moving on if Red Bull are happy with Alex Albon. Because Verstappen's in a long-term deal. If Albon's being a strong number 2 driver, there's no need to move him on. But if Gasly's proving the kind of performances we have seen him do in a Toro Rosso, I think he needs to get out of that team, a little bit like Carlos Sainz has been able to do. So where does he go? That's obviously the big question. I think McLaren, there could be a seat potentially there if Carlos Sainz gets picked up by a bigger team. Likewise with Renault, if Daniel Ricciardo gets picked up by a bigger team. Haas, I said earlier, I think could be a team that potentially loses both drivers. I really do believe that. I think both of them have to really put in the work this season. Racing Point, maybe Sergio Perez looks elsewhere and a Pierre Gasly could be an interesting driver to bring in. I could kind of see that happening. And Williams, that's a last resort. Sorry, Williams fans. Hey, they could get good in 21 and they could bring in Pierre Gasly as their number 1 driver if George Russell moves on. Maybe. Yeah, I'm probably kidding myself a little bit too much there. But I think Gasly's going to have a good career in Formula 1. I always find that the Red Bull Young Driver programme is a little bit unforgiving, and that one short chance he had, maybe he blew it. But I think already, that podium in Brazil was testament to this. I think he's proved his speed in Formula 1, and I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. I really don't. So I think in conclusion to that question, I'm unsure of what Gasly's going to do in his career, but so far, he's ticking all the right boxes, and I'm convinced he's going in the right direction, which I wasn't so convinced at the summer break. So progress being made. Thank you for your question. I might do a little bit more research on Pierre Gasly, because it's a really interesting case study. But the final question, really difficult to pronounce name, this one, so I'm not going to attempt it. I am really sorry. I'm not going to embarrass myself like that. But if you're new around here, you might not know, but question 5 is our, what I like to call, audience participation question. Don't get too nervous. It's just literally, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below and have your say. The question is, if you were to bring a Formula 1 driver, past or present, to race again in Formula 1, who would it be? I had to think long and hard about this one, because I think past or present, I think that's in terms of, if they're still driving in other categories kind of idea. I think a very popular answer would be Ayrton Senna to come back and race against Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel. That would be cool. I can't deny it. I'm a big fan of Jim Clark. I think as well Fangio would be quite cool. Just to see, he dominated Formula 1 a little bit like Jim Clark. So those two, that would be really cool to see the impact they would have on modern Formula 1. But I think I want to focus more on my answer on drivers that are still driving currently at the moment. I'm not going to pick Fernando Alonso. Don't worry. It wouldn't surprise me if he comes back. It really wouldn't. And I know a lot of people really like to poo-poo that, but hey, I think Alonso's a brilliant driver, so I'm not going to get too upset if he comes back to Formula 1. And the meme potential of Alonso, Anyway, back to the question. I think the driver I would love to see come back to Formula 1, and there's two. I love Pascal Wehrlein. I think he was a little bit wrongly treated in Formula 1. I think he proved himself to be a strong driver. There is rumours he could come back with a new team in 21. But the driver I'm actually going to go with is Jean-Eric Vergne. A driver who I included in my top 20 drivers even of the decade. And quite a few people were surprised at that. But I thought he was great at Toro Rosso. I really did. And that season where it was Ricciardo or Vergne to move up to Red Bull, that was a toss of the coin. They were both so equally matched in that junior team. The year after, when it was himself up against Kvyat, he was the better of the two. I can't deny that. He was the better of the two in 2014. But Kvyat with age on his side, and to be fair to Kvyat, he was very young at the time, and he was looking promising, and he did do very well in 2015 for Red Bull. So, in hindsight, it wasn't an awful decision. But then to lose Vergne from the Red Bull family, or from Formula 1 completely, was criminal. I couldn't believe it. He had done so well in that Toro Rosso car. I was shocked that another team didn't pick him up. I really was. And when teams like Lotus had Maldonado in the car, I really felt that Vergne deserved a chance. But money speaks in Formula 1. He lost his Red Bull backing in Formula 1. Verstappen and Sainz came into that team, so it made sense to move Vergne on. I was just disappointed no one picked him up. And I think he's proved in Formula E, where the calibre of that series is getting better and better. Likewise with Wehrlein and Van Dorn, and De Vries as well this year. I could go on and on. But I think Vergne, with those 2 World Championships now in Formula E, I think it's proved he probably should have stayed in Formula 1 a little bit longer, and I think someone should have taken a gamble on him. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. These mailbox videos are getting longer and longer. I need to calm things down a little bit, I think. Anyway, if you want to ask a question for next week, feel free to do so. Comments below, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.